Today's story is a little bit special and has been referred to by recognised leaders in UFO research throughout the world as the holy grail of alien abduction stories because of its multiple corroborating witnesses, so much so it would become embedded in the 2016 reboot of The X-Files, when the first episode of the new series, former FBI agent Fox Mulder would meet with right-wing talk show host Tad O'Malley, who had an interest in the paranormal. Now, to test Tad's knowledge, Mulder would ask him what he knew about the Kelly Cahill case. With O'Malley responding, Kelly Cahill and her husband were driving home in Victoria, Australia, when a craft appeared overhead. The Cahills lost an hour of time, and Kelly was hospitalised with severe stomach pain after discovering a triangle-shaped mark near her navel. Her story was the one with the potential to provide definitive proof, once and for all, that, as Fox Mulder would say in The X-Files, the truth is out there. On the 7th of August 1993, 27-year-old mother of three and devout Christian Kelly Cahill, which is a pseudonym of her real name, claimed to have had a close encounter of the fourth kind. That being, not only did she see a UFO, more recently referred to as UAP, but her experience went well beyond the observation and involved a terrifying abduction that was preceded by a loss of time and memory, leaving behind subtle indicators that she may have been subjected to something very concerning. On that day in August 1993, Kelly was driving with her husband Andrew from their home in Narre Warren, which is a suburb of the outskirts of Melbourne, and they were travelling along the Belgrave-Hallam Road to a region called the Dandenongs to have dinner with some friends. The Dandenongs is a scenic mountain range that is a popular weekend getaway for inner city residents, with expanses of rolling pastures, market gardens and a state forest that is certainly quiet but not remote by Australian standards. Kelly and Andrew were driving on dusk when together they saw strange round orange lights in the field. The lights were intriguing, but not being sure of exactly what it was they could see, they left it at that and continued on as planned, arriving at their friend's house for dinner, where they would describe the unusual sighting, which they all laughed off as being strange, but nothing too concerning. It was coming up to midnight, so Kelly and Andrew thanked their friends for an enjoyable evening and headed off on their way home, travelling back along the Belgrave-Hallam Road as they'd done on many times before. It was partway through this journey that they again encountered the strange lights, first noticing them at a distance of what seemed to be about 1 kilometre away, or perhaps over half a mile, appearing to be near some distant treetops, again drawing their curiosity to determine exactly what it was they were seeing. It was appearing as though it would be described by Kelly as perhaps a blimp, or some sort of round ring encircled with glass that from a distance looked like windows. Although they were travelling to the noise of their vehicle, they noted there was no sound that might be expected from some sort of machinery that might create such sort of light. They continued on for about another 1 to 2 kilometres, or about 1.5 miles down the road, at which point they encountered what they thought was a wall of light across the road a little further ahead. Kelly was becoming startled and asked Andrew what he was going to do, and he replied he would just keep driving as this was the main arterial road and there's really no other option, and although very strange, there was no apparent cause for concern. But Kelly became fearful and overcome with adrenaline, but in the next instant there was a bright flash of light followed by nothing. In a sudden moment, the blink of an eye, they had somehow covered over 1 kilometre further down the road, as if awakening from a frightened driver's potentially fatal microsleep. They were suddenly startled by their car careening off the road at high speeds towards a bend, with Andrew hitting the brakes, screeching the vehicle to a stop. Somewhat confused, they noted the illuminated object had now disappeared, as if it had never been there to begin with. But none of this seemed to make sense, and she asked Andrew what had happened, and he didn't know either, and figured they must have driven around a corner or something, and that may have caused the moment of disorientation. But Kelly recalled it was much more than just a simple moment of strange confusion, feeling as though momentarily she'd blacked out, and it was more than that. She could smell vomit in the car, but could not understand where that smell had come from. However, what soon became very concerning was when they noticed that the time on their watches had somehow progressed an hour forward in that mysterious blink of an eye moment that Andrew believed he may have simply been distracted and rounded the corner of the road. So with no convincing explanation between either Kelly or Andrew about what had just happened, they simply continued on their way home, arriving much later than planned due to the hour of lost time. But the strangeness didn't end there. Kelly noticed a distinctive triangular mark on her navel that had not been there previously, which was precise and well defined in appearance, leaving her confused about what could have possibly caused it to happen unnoticed. Soon after this incident, Kelly started to experience severe stomach pains and was hospitalised in the weeks that followed, and she soon began to experience recurring dreams where she would encounter visions of tall, skinny, shadow-like figures with bulging red eyes. And this unusual period of intrusive sleep was also overshadowed by experiences far more extreme and frightening than troubled nightmares. For Kelly claims she experienced several visitations from tall, black-hooded figures with glowing red eyes. Now I must pause to add, Andrew wasn't soundly sleeping alongside Kelly throughout all of this, as they had established a routine of sleeping in separate bedrooms due to Andrew's work schedule. And we must also pause to consider how incredibly strange this period of nightmares and apparent visitations by unearthly beings must have been for someone like Kelly, a devout Christian whose interpretation of the world consisted of what was outlined in the Bible, and being someone with no interest in the paranormal or extraterrestrial topics. This was really something outside of her scope of reasoning and logic. So we're looking at 3 key points of interest so far. Firstly, Kelly witnessed an unusual object while driving home that night. She also experienced mental and physical indicators such as the lost time and also the triangle on her navel and hospitalisation for stomach cramps. Thirdly, these intrusive dreams and encounters while sleeping in the weeks that followed. There was clearly some sort of link, and soon all of these pieces would start to make sense as she began to piece together the missing pieces of this unbelievable puzzle. This awakening began following another visit to her friend's house in the Dandenongs, which triggered an emotional response of terror as she drove past the area where she and Andrew had encountered the lights, triggering a total recall of her missing memory about what had happened during that lost hour that left them dazed and confused. Her recollection of that night would continue on from the moment it left off, with her in a state of adrenaline-fueled fear about the strange light and asking Andrew what he was going to do. She could now remember, as they got closer, seeing the illuminated object across the field and realised it was something very much out of the ordinary, being described as a massive size and causing an overwhelming sense of curiosity about what on earth it could be. And well, curiosity got the cat. Kelly and Andrew stopped the car with him pulling over on the side of the road, where they both got out to investigate. And although this was a quiet country road late on a winter's night, they felt somewhat reassured in noticing they were not alone, seeing another car pull up about 100 metres further down the road. But they didn't really take further notice of them, instead focusing their attention on trying to figure out what this mysterious and strange object could be. And together, Kelly and Andrew crossed the road overlooking the field and stopped at the fence line to try and get a better look. What they would see left them totally awestruck, as if watching a scene from a science fiction movie in real life. They could clearly make out the illuminated object as being some sort of huge craft, and things only escalated from there, when only about 30 to 45 seconds later, they noticed what Kelly described as a tall dark being that was estimated to be about 7 foot tall, with the most memorable feature being its big eyes that were lit up in a bright burning red colour. And this first figure was soon accompanied by a further 7 to 8 others standing behind it, seemingly aware of the people watching them from the edge of the nearby road. Kelly said she sensed an energy like some sort of low-level frequency that gave her a feeling of terror, and she began screaming. Now this really got the attention of the strange beings, with their eyes brightly lighting up as big red burning eyes do, and they started advancing across the field towards them. And Kelly detected some sort of telepathic thought between them that said, "Let's kill them." So having picked up on this murderous intent, Kelly started yelling to Andrew and also the people from the car pulled up down the road. "They've got no souls, they're evil, they're going to kill us." But again, Kelly's vocalizations really seemed to increase the hostility they were encountering, and this time they responded by charging across the field towards them, splitting up into 2 groups as they approached both vehicles, when suddenly Kelly received a blow from some sort of incredible wave of energy to her chest, which carried with it an incredible wave of pure, unadulterated horror, knocking her to the ground feeling like she was winded. Trying to stay conscious, she couldn't see and thought she was going to die, so she pulled herself up into a sitting position and was able to hear their voices, which were described as flawless, well-rounded, with perfect diction and enunciated precisely in the best English. They would speak the cliche phrase, "We mean you no harm," but with a tone of sarcasm that came across as arrogant and condescending, and Andrew was heard to respond, "Then why did you harm Kelly?" with one of the red-eyed beings replying in a Darth Vader-like revelation, "Why would I harm her? After all, I am her father." The last thing she remembers is one of the beings grabbing her by the shoulder and fighting off to get out of its grasp. Then everything went darkened and she slipped into a state of unconsciousness, and what happened to her from that moment until the time her and Andrew were back in their car, startled with a sense of disorientation, remains unknown. But as alluded to at the beginning of this story, the reason it has become referred to as the holy grail of abduction stories by ufologists, as well as drawing significant attention from media, is because of the witnesses who would be able to corroborate Kelly's recollection, enabled through their own undertakings of investigative hypnosis to unlock deeply buried memories. The findings of these investigations would be documented in a 300-page report by a leading UFO research organisation who would record the statement made by the occupants of the second car that pulled over that night, referred to as Jane, Glenda and Bill, whose stories and sketches matched the submissions of Kelly and Andrew, although they'd never actually met each other. And like Kelly, Jane and Glenda also had triangular marks on their skin near their navels, but unlike Kelly, they also had 3 small red dots along their inner thigh, and Glenda had a mark around her ankle as if she had been shackled or strapped down by something. The UFO investigators also visited the site where Kelly and Andrew had the encounter and noted the detection of unusual radiation and magnetic readings in the area where the craft appeared to have been located. Now, Kelly Cahill's encounter is noteworthy as it reflects a commonality with other people's sightings, particularly women who claim to have been abducted and report having the same or similar experiences, often involving abdominal and genital pain. And although we can't say with certainty that Kelly had sex with one or maybe more aliens during that lost hour, we can't be sure she didn't either. There have been many reports throughout the world by women who mention early pregnancies that go on simply to cease to exist following an encounter, but without the normal indicators of a miscarriage, and treating doctors providing the explanation that the body simply absorbed the fetus. So when a lot of people are telling much the same story, has to make you stop and wonder the possibilities. But that's going to do it for today, guys. As Travis Walton and Kelly would attest, never pull over for mysterious lights in the countryside, and I'll see you next time.